Thank you. Good. Hello, everyone. My name is Rick Bernthal. I'm a member of the board of Wellbeing International, and I'm delighted to welcome you to this webinar on our global dog campaign. Wellbeing International is a new, quite lean organization which seeks to lend some of the very best minds and the deepest experience to the worldwide efforts to improve animal welfare. More than a decade ago, when we were colleagues at Humane Society International, Andrew Rowan spoke to me about his vision for ending global dog homelessness. It was a breathtaking idea, both in its scope and simplicity. The core elements are familiar to most of you, I'm quite sure, and Andrew will expound on them momentarily. But the underlying premise was that if we could humanely reduce the number of dogs in communities in which their overwhelming numbers had led inevitably to dog bites and rabies, disease and disruption, the natural bond between humans and dogs would inevitably come to the fore, leading to manageable dog populations and long-term humane solutions to the homelessness problem. The beauty of Andrew's vision was that he realized that in all the world's cultures, despite their diversity and differences and values and priorities, in so many other aspects of their lives, that bond between humans and dogs was the key common resource that could be found everywhere. There were then, and there are now, several necessary elements for this vision to be realized on a global scale. Funding, of course, trained veterinarians and veterinary technicians, a progressive local government which was willing to look past the feudal and draconian alternatives of repeated cullings and killings, a media presence which could help inform others of a program's success, and of central importance, documentation and data to prove the case and to prepare it for worldwide scale. Andrew Rowan was and is a visionary on this and on so many other issues of animal welfare. I've long believed that there's literally no one who has greater mastery of the issues and worldwide initiatives to help animals. And now, after 40 years in the field at some of the leading animal welfare and advocacy organizations, Dr. Rowan is now president and chief program officer of WBI. Andrew?
Thank you, Rick. We're going to start with our WBI video on the Global Dog Campaign. So, Laura, if you could run that. Thank you very much, everybody. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I do want to comment briefly on Rick's introduction. He's a lawyer, so he tends to overstate his case in these situations. I would like to briefly review how we might end dog homelessness worldwide and how the WBI GDC approach has evolved to promote that goal. In 1983, I established the Tufts Center for Animals and Public Policy and started working seriously on global dog, cat welfare and demographics in the United States. At the time, there was no national data on shelter trends and minimal tracking of the impact of different remedies for dog and cat overpopulation. Over the next 15 years, the center produced estimates of unwanted dogs and cats and showed how sterilization appeared to reduce their number. Then in 1997, I moved from Tufts to be the CEO of Humane Society International, and that move led to an expansion of focus from just North American dog well-being to a worldwide effort. By 2010, I was convinced that a relatively modest infusion of effectively targeted resources, maybe $5 to $10 million a year for at least 10 years, along with the concurrent efforts of many of the other organizations and municipalities, could in fact end dog homelessness. The additional funding would have supported a few demonstration sterilization projects in high-need countries, but most critically, it would develop international data collection on global dog populations, on local dog management projects, and on dog homelessness. Changes in the number of homeless dogs would be tracked over time, and the most effective project would be identified and promoted. Spending on humane dog management has grown dramatically this century. In 2000, about $140 million were being spent by international animal protection organizations. Those same groups are spending $350 million or more today. And a substantial portion of those expenditures, maybe 50%, are focused on dog projects. Many municipalities and states have also begun committing resources to address homeless dogs, in part because they now recognize the link between dog homelessness and public health concerns, such as dog bites and rabies. In addition, new anti-rabies campaigns have been launched this century to eliminate rabies in Africa and Asia. Europe and the Americas have already largely achieved this goal. The world is now spending an estimated $2 billion annually in direct costs on the prevention and treatment of rabies. These funds cover human medical expenses to treat dog bite victims and also to prevent the spread of rabies by dogs through anti-vaccination projects. The humane dog management campaigns and the anti-rabies efforts tend to complement one another, but ideally they should be better integrated to leverage resources more effectively. There are important differences in approach between anti-rabies campaigns and humane dog management efforts. Specifically, anti-rabies programs concentrate spending on vaccination alone, while humane dog projects tend to combine vaccination and sterilization. A number of humane dog management initiatives have been linked to significant declines in human rabies incidents. Ultimately, we need to determine the most cost-effective strategy for disease reduction and for dog management. The GDC has developed a focus on data collection and reporting, especially time series projects lasting 5 or more years. Relatively few projects collect data to identify the initial size of the target population of homeless dogs and then track the population changes that occur as the project is implemented. The lack of time series data for specific projects creates a significant deficit in what we know and understand about humane dog management. In addition to launch the GDC, WBI analyzed all the data we could find on global dog populations and produced that map that you just saw. And we currently estimate there are around 300 million homeless dogs out of the world's 800 million or so total dog population. In developing this estimate, WBI had to develop an appropriate definition of a homeless dog. Defining dog homelessness is in fact more complicated than one might suspect. Several studies now indicate that a large percentage, maybe 95% or more in some cases, of street dogs may be claimed to be owned by a particular household in that community. But while these dogs likely receive some food and water from the owning household, they typically receive little to no veterinary care. Accordingly, WBI has decided to define a homeless dog as one that spends most or all of its life on the street and receives little to no veterinary care. As the video indicated, such dogs typically have relatively short lives and 3/4 of their puppies die before they reach a year of age. Most observers would consider such dogs to be homeless, despite the claims that they're owned by a particular household. Like many humane dog management projects, this GDC is also focused on vaccination and sterilization. It appears that projects including sterilization improve the human-dog relationship in a community, but we are seeking incontrovertible data to support this inference. It is important for us to find that data because the argument is that it's a lot cheaper just to vaccinate the dogs rather than to sterilize and vaccinate them. Humane dog management will require a careful long-term implementation coupled with systematic tracking of progress. We have also started to use the idea of a relative dog population. That is the number of dogs per humans, and we use a metric of dogs per 1,000 humans. That number ranges from a few dogs per 1,000 humans to over 400 dogs per 1,000 people across the world. Similarly, the proportion of dogs that are homeless in a particular country varies significantly. There are no homeless dogs in Sweden, while 75% or more of the dog population in some African and Asian countries may be considered homeless. In addition, the proportion of homeless dogs is not necessarily stable. The level of dog homelessness varies over time as the human-dog relationship changes. This is a really important concept because that is what we hope to do if we to end dog homelessness. In the United States, around 1/3 of dogs were homeless in 1950. Today, perhaps 2% or less might be considered homeless. In Costa Rica, one of our flagship countries, the proportion of homeless dogs is currently changing rapidly. In 2000, only 15% of owned dogs slept indoors at night, but today 2/3 are. In addition, the proportion of Costa Rican dog-owning households with at least one sterilized dog has jumped from under 20% in 2000 to 62% currently. The variation in relative dog numbers and the percentages of homeless dogs is undoubtedly influenced by various factors, including economic capacity of a country, the veterinary infrastructure in the country, cultural issues, legislation, public policy, and country stability. WBI also suspects that the dog sterilization rate is an important factor in relative dog numbers and the rate of dog homelessness. Sterilization of companion animals is a relatively recent approach to their management. Dr. Krishna will be describing how it was developed as a humane management solution following this presentation. He will explain how sterilization is being applied in India, and other speakers will discuss its application in Costa Rica and Kabul. The 3 countries represented in our webinar today provide an interesting cross-section of challenges to end dog homelessness. India probably has the largest number of homeless dogs, but also has the most progressive animal protection laws in the world today. A national government body is managing animal welfare in the country. And whereas Costa Rica has a very high rate of dog ownership, but is transitioning from relatively high levels of dog homelessness to much lower levels. Kabul has had many ongoing political challenges and instability, but the project persuaded the municipality to stop culling street dogs and embrace a vaccination sterilization approach instead. Despite the country undergoing significant recent political change, the Kabul Dog Project is back on track, probably in part because the new government has decided the project has value for both the city and its citizens. WBI pictures the Global Dog Campaign as an initiative that aims to speed up changes in the human-dog relationship that have been documented in the USA, are being observed in Costa Rica, and are beginning to show progress in India, promise in India and Afghanistan. We have developed a simple 4-stage classification typology: no progress, some progress, good progress, and exceptional progress that recognizes the uniqueness and diversity among countries. This typology uses various factors to evaluate a country's progress status. These factors include resources availability, and the quality of data on dog populations. Resources would consist of economic capacity, small animal veterinary clinic capacity, the number and size of animal NGOs and shelters, and the interest and commitment of states, municipalities, and local communities. Culture and attitude elements will, of course, influence how dogs are viewed and treated and the extent of available animal protection laws and their implementation. countries at risk would address countries undergoing humanitarian crises and conflicts. Homeless dogs would focus on whether or not the dogs were, whether or not data is available and the quality of data needed to generate the indicators required to track absolute per capita and changes in dog homelessness. Some countries have made little or no progress in ending dog homelessness and appear to be unconcerned about the issue. Many countries are now engaged in addressing these challenges. They may be making progress even though they may have large numbers of homeless dogs because of country-specific cultural factors. A few countries, mainly those with significant financial resources and other enabling factors, have either eliminated or are very close to eliminating dog homelessness. WBI's GDC has a global focus, but is constructed as an overlay on the many existing activities and projects worldwide that currently manage and address dog welfare. Hundreds of thousands of dogs are being sterilized today by these projects. As already mentioned, billions of dollars are also being spent globally on dog management, but we have very little idea of which expenditures have local or global impact. This deficit must be addressed, and in the process, we must take into account the many factors that distinguish one country from another and influence how individual communities, municipalities, states, and nations address the homeless dog challenges. WBI will continue to develop data resources that indicate how specific countries may be progressing along the track to end dog homelessness. In the end, better data will help everybody, from animal organizations to municipalities to national bodies, implement more effective management strategies and eventually eliminate dog homelessness. Thank you very much. Over to you, Rick.
Thank you, Andrew. I'd like now to introduce Dr. S. Chinny Krishna, a colleague of mine on the board of directors of Wellbeing International. It's hard to imagine anyone working as long and as importantly in the field of animal welfare as Andrew, but I think Chinny may have him beat. He's one of the founders of Blue Cross of India, an animal protection organization based in Chennai, which has been in operation for more than 50 years. Chinny has served on so many animal protection and welfare organizations over the years, including 3 terms as the vice chair of the Animal Welfare Board of India, an important position within the Indian government. I believe that Chinny was actually the very first person to publicly advocate for sterilization as a humane way to manage dog populations around the world. This idea, so widely accepted now, was rather revolutionary when Chinny proposed it in 1964. Chinny?
Thank you, Kathleen, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Indians have had the tradition of living in harmony with nature, and most animals were treated as the mounts or vehicles of one god or another. The dog is treated as the companion of Lord Shiva. In 1964, I visited 2 places that made an indelible impression on me. The first was to the Madras Municipal Dog Pound to witness the electrocution of dogs that had remained unclaimed for 3 days. After witnessing the barbaric killing of the dogs, my first reaction, very sadly, was that there had to be a better way to kill these poor animals. Over the next few days, my study took me to the dusty archives of the Madras Corporation, the second oldest civic body in the world after the City of London, incorporated in 1688. The second place that I visited was the rabies wards of the government-run hospitals, where I saw the first of 2 rabies patients that I have seen. Needless to say, this was probably the largest motivating factor for me to try and eliminate rabies as far as Madras city was concerned, or Chennai as it's known now. The advent of the British in Madras saw the beginning of the oldest organized dog killing program in the world. Started in 1860, it was formalized by the Madras Municipal City Act of 1919, which had as a stated aim to the protection of the citizens of Madras from animals. The second stated objective of the Act was to control the number of dogs on the city streets. Slide, please. From approximately 50 dogs in 1860, the number of dogs killed by the municipality went up each year. The methods of killing also changed from shooting, which was probably the most humane method at that time, to poisoning with strychnine and clubbing. And in about 1950, the RSPCA in London gifted the city of Madras with an electrocution chamber. This was a crude device which had a copper strap around the neck of the dog, which stood on a copper plate, and an electric current was passed through the animal. Since the current passed only through the heart and the body of the dog and not its brain, the muscles of the dog were in a state of tetanic contraction, but the animal was fully conscious for over 30 seconds. As I mentioned, in 1964, following my visit to the dog pound, I began to look into all the figures regarding the dog killing program in Madras. If the stated aim of the Municipal Act of 1919 was to control the number of dogs on the street and the number of human rabies cases, I found that the municipality had failed spectacularly on both counts. Each year, the number of dogs killed had increased, and by 1964, over 16,000 dogs were being killed each year. And each year, more and more rabies deaths were recorded by the city. In the 1950s and 1960s, when I was in college, the most ubiquitous sign was the inverted red triangle and the accompanying words, "A small family is a happy family," the slogan of the Government of India's birth control program. From humans to dogs, it was no quantum leap in thinking. The haunting images of the rabies victims and the barbaric electrocution of the dogs in the pound inspired me to try and find an alternative that works. It was thus that we came up with the concept of the Catch, Neuter, Release program for street dogs. The Blue Cross of India called it the Animal Birth Control Program, or ABC for short, to convince the municipality that control of the street dog population was as simple as ABC. And the biggest compliment that the WHO, the OIE, and the FAO pay us is not calling it a TNR program anymore, but referring to it as the ABC program. It took us over 30 years to get the Madras Corporation to stop the killing and go on for the mass sterilization and vaccination program instead. In 1996, at which time as many as 135 dogs per day, that's close to 50,000 dogs per year, were being killed in Madras alone. The mayor of Madras converted the dog pound into a sterilization center. Within 3 years, the number of human rabies deaths began to come down from the high of 120 reported cases in 1966, when the killing was finally stopped. In 2007, that number had come down to 0. Impressed with what they saw, the Government of India in 2001 notified the dog control rules under the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act of 1960, which mandated that dogs could no longer be killed as a method of population or rabies control. Next slide, please. The Blue Cross of India's ABC program has been included by Radford University on the environmental history timeline as one of the major milestones in world environment history. Thank you. As you can see, both in Jaipur, where a similar program started in 1996, and in Madras, or Chennai as it's called now, where also we started the same thing in 1996, the rabies deaths plummeted. And in a few years in Jaipur, it was 0. In Madras, it became 0 in 2007. And this was instrumental really in convincing other municipalities that this was the way to go.
Greetings. I would like to speak just a bit about the Global Dog Campaign project itself. The project has been developed using a global lens. Its international focus aims to understand and provide insights into the drivers that will end dog homelessness in every country. Although the GDC has a global focus, dog project implementation and progress, as with politics, are primarily local. Therefore, the GDC has both international and local components and has been designated to work with local organizations and municipalities to augment their capacities to address homeless dogs. WBI has designated the GDC so it does not compete with existing projects and programs, but instead is an overlay of additional support for projects being implemented by others. There are organizations and government entities across the world that are doing outstanding work. For example, Soy Dog Foundation, the Dogs Trust, Four Paws, Humane Society International, and many local organizations and municipalities. However, few local organizations have the resources, capacity, or expertise to collect and analyze critical data, to store such data, or to maintain data sets over time. Furthermore, baseline and follow-up dog surveys, along with household surveys, are often not part of local project designs. The lack of accurate and reliable dog population data is a significant gap as the world focuses on human dog management across more than 190 countries. The GDC proposes developing a database that will provide a permanent and sustainable repository that tracks projects around the globe and helps to develop a better understanding of what makes for an effective project. The data repository will also include dog well-being and human public health information. It should go without saying that developing project designs for 190 countries has significant challenges. Countries vary in available resources, cultures, attitudes, behaviors, and differ in their political structures. 3 examples come to mind that illustrate the difficulty of this task. First, defining and measuring dog homelessness is surprisingly tricky. As indicated in an earlier presentation, the definition has significant impacts on how surveys are conducted, dogs are counted, and the dog population is analyzed. Second, as discussed earlier, the lack of quality time series data for and across countries continues to be a significant hurdle for the efforts to end dog homelessness. Third, measuring progress in countries with different resources, cultures, attitudes, and major humanitarian and government crisis poses significant challenges. I'd like to take this opportunity to share GDC's evolving approach to evaluate countries' progresses. The focus of this typology is progress, and the ultimate goal is no homeless dogs. The big question for GDC was, how do we determine the progress? In addition, what factors are essential to any identified progress that we can then be applied to project designs? Can we simply compare the number or percentage of homeless dogs for a country such as Burundi with 700 GDP per capita in 2020, compared to another small country such as Luxembourg with 100,000 GDP per capita in 2020. To begin to sort through this challenge, GDC identified 4 primary factors to compare progress in countries. If you view the country progress status approach, you will see the progress indicators are really focused on progress, no progress, progress, good progress, outstanding progress. And the primary factors for the country status and progress consideration really focuses on resources, culture and attitude, countries at risk, and homeless dogs. Under resources, we begin to capture the GDP per capita, small animal vet capacity, animal organizations and shelters, and state and municipal and community engagement. The culture and attitude is, of course, essential in this discussion. The behaviors, attitudes, culture influence, legislation, and laws and policies. Another aspect is countries at risk. There are countries that have humanitarian disasters, economic, natural disasters, and also, not to miss, conflicts and government changes. And our final grouping of these primary factors is homeless dogs. And first of all, do we have the data to actually determine the total dog population, total homeless dog population, the homeless dogs to total dogs percentage, and the homeless percentage change, which is this rate of change, which we're very interested in measuring progress and not just absolute numbers, will also be considered as well. To give an example of these of this approach, I'd like to discuss three examples. One is Kabul, Afghanistan. Afghanistan is a country undergoing significant changes in government and is still affected by conflict and has a very modest per capita GDP. One might assume that the opportunities for progress would be minimal. However, Mayhew, Afghanistan is demonstrating that such assumptions are incorrect. India, a country with one of the largest homeless dog populations in the world, would appear to be a place where progress would be especially difficult. And yet, because of the cultural factors, India has probably the strongest animal protection legislation in the world and has considerable interest in addressing dog homelessness. Costa Rica, a high-income country as defined by the World Bank, but where dogs have traditionally been allowed to roam freely on the streets, is undergoing a significant shift in human-dog interactions. It is possible that the changes occurring in Costa Rica are also taking place in other Latin American countries. As the GDC continues to roll out, the approach typology will continue to be refined. However, we believe that these primary factors will be important in progress consideration and refining dog management programs within countries, each with its own unique set of factors. In summary, the GDC has three central pillars. Data needs, number one, collection, storage, analyze, and the use of data over long-term, more than 5 years. Data will be used to develop dog projection models, to enhance the allocation of resources, and to leverage efforts effectively. Local case studies. GDC campaign will support sterilization, vaccination, along with survey support for its local partners, and use these project outcomes and impacts to determine the most effective approaches, resource allocation, and leveraging of capacities. Number three, elevating the priority of ending dog homelessness. A focus on outreach and engagement at all levels to encourage vertically integrating humane dog management issues within the local, municipal, state, and national political agendas, linking dog homelessness and the associated rabies and dog bite concerns with public health to leverage resources and enable funds to be spent more effectively. Thank you very much for your attention, and we would now like to move on to introduce three of our consortium implementing partners. Thank you. As part of the Global Dog Campaign, we have identified a few very effective organizations in different countries as consortium implementing partners. CIPs, partners, flagship partners, they're the same. You will hear from representatives of three of them today. Mayhew, Afghanistan, and a project in Kabul, a shelter-cum-veterinary clinic. AHPPA in Costa Rica, and the Blue Cross of India located in Chennai. They are all doing wonderful work addressing dog homelessness in their target communities. I should note that although the three partners are live on hand and will be able to answer questions at the end, we have taped these presentations in an effort to avoid any, how should we say, internet challenges. So I'd like to introduce Dr. Jahil Mohamezad. We refer to him as Dr. Mo. He's a veterinarian from Afghanistan who is now running a dog vaccination and sterilization project in Kabul on behalf of the Mayhew, London-based animal protection organization. The project launched in 2017 and has already produced encouraging results, lower dog bites and lower incidence of human rabies. Dr. Mo?
Thank you, Kathleen. I'm very delighted to be here today. I joined the Mayhew in 2001 when I left Afghanistan when the civil war started there, and that was a fortunate move because the Mayhew was interested in international animal projection project, and I was able to be a part of the project addressing welfare at the Kabul Zoo, and then was able to establish a dog welfare project in Afghanistan. Why we had to start the project in Afghanistan? Kabul municipality had a culling program and was killing dogs through poisoning program, strychnine, and every year they were killing between 17 to 20,000 dogs a year. We had to sign an MOU with them. First, they had to stop culling program, and then we established mass rabies vaccination program, and parallel to that later on a TNR program. As you can see on the slide, showing on the left 16 districts of Kabul, each dot is indicating one dog is captured and vaccinated or sterilized. On the right side, you can see each dot also indication of one dog is vaccinated against rabies. And generally in all over 16 districts of Kabul. Can you change the slide, please? Yes, first we had to train the dog catchers, the municipality staff who were a part of the poisoning program. We selected those people. They love to improve welfare issues in Kabul. We send them to India, to HSI, and thank you to Rahul Segal. They helped our team to learn how to catch safely, how to catch dogs safely. Also a big task for us to train vets in Kabul to sterilize dog in a better standard and as a Mayhew standard. So that took us several months. Then we were able to start a vaccination program. Can you change the slide, please? As you can see, on the first year, we have managed to vaccinate over 23,000 dogs, and also in the second cycle, over 26,000 dogs, and on the third cycle, over 22,000 dogs vaccinated against rabies. Can you change the slide, please? In 2019, we have managed to start a sterilization program to manage the dog population in the city. And within 2 years, we have managed to sterilize over 21,000 dogs in the city. And we achieved good result after 3 years of a vaccination program and 2 years of a sterilization program. After 3 years of a vaccination program, we have a 0 human death record in Kabul. That's the Ministry of Public Health data showing us. And also we have, for the first time after 2 years, we have managed to manage the dog population in the city and decline the number by 3,000 dogs, and improve the welfare issues as well. The people aware of rabies and aware of how to deal with the stray dogs and be kind and nice with the stray dogs. Can you change the slide, please? It's a great opportunity for the students, vet faculty students. They come and see and learn the clinical work in our clinic, and also is a good future for them, because there was no any many practices to learn small animal surgery or to improve their skills. Can you change the slide, please? This District 22, which we are focusing now, is a dumping area, over 300 dogs in that area. We are focusing, we're trying to sterilize all these dogs. Can you change the slide, please? This is our team in Kabul, clinic, and also a field team. And I would like to say thank you to all parties and partners who help us in this journey, especially Wellbeing International, Dr. Andrew, who helped us with a methodology of the survey, analyzing our survey and sharing the documents from other countries to make sure we follow the standard guideline. Thank you.
We'd like to now introduce Lillian Schnock. She has been involved in caring for animals all her life. In 1991, she took over a rundown shelter in Costa Rica and has built it into a very effective operation that is now sterilizing almost 30,000 animals a year. Lillian?
Thank you, Kathleen. In 1991, I took over a rundown shelter in San Rafael, in the Central Valley near the capital of San Jose. At the time, there were relatively few veterinary service and roaming street dogs were all over the place. We slowly began to upgrade the shelter and the veterinary clinic and began to conduct dog and cat sterilization for pet owners in the communities. There has been a very big change in Costa Rica in how pets are cared for and in the sterilization rate for own dogs in the past 15 years. For example, in 2008, we increased the number of sterilizations performed 5 to 6-fold, and then over the past decade, we doubled that number. In 2020, we performed almost 30,000 sterilizations, surgeries, up from 1,400 in 2006. In 2016, the Costa Rican government agency responsible for animal welfare began to seize dogs from cruelty situations, hoarding, dog fighting, and other cases, and brought them to our shelter for care and rehabilitation. In 2020, we took in almost 8,000 animals, up from around 2,010 years earlier. At the same time, our adoptions went up and for our euthanasias went down. In the AHPPA was a shelter in the United States, it would be recognized as a no-kill shelter. That is, more than 90% of our animal intake are adopted or returned to owners. In 2020, our life release rate was 95.6%, comparable to the most successful shelters in the United States. In 2003, a survey found that 18% of the owned dogs in the Central Valley of Costa Rica were sterilized and 27% slept indoors at night. In 2020, 62% of owned dogs in Costa Rica are sterilized and 66% sleep indoors at night. AHPPA has been leading the way for animals in Costa Rica for 30 years now. Costa Ricans are providing their own pets with more humane care over the past 2 decades, and the number of roaming street dogs has declined dramatically in the Central Valley around the capital. One can still see street dogs in more rural communities, but we expect the changes that have occurred in the Central Valley to spread nationally over the next 5 to 10 years. AHPPA is proud to be working with Wellbeing International and to participate as a flagship partner in their global dog campaign. Over the years, we have worked with the founders of WBI. We have come to appreciate the importance of systematic data collection to track progress both for our own shelter but also for the country as a whole. We believe that the Costa Rican situation reflects widespread changes in pet care and management throughout Latin America.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. For 3 years from 2007, there were no reported cases of human rabies in Madras, which had by now been renamed as Chennai. In 2010, Chennai was declared rabies-free after 3 consecutive years of no rabies in human beings. This was thanks to the massive privately funded animal birth control program undertaken by the Blue Cross of India. In order to ensure the involvement of the Corporation of Chennai, we had insisted that the dog catching was done by the corporation and the animals handed over to us. Next slide, please. Most months, we spayed or neutered over 1,100 dogs. And by 2010, we estimate that approximately 65 to 70% of the dogs had been neutered. These were identified by ear tipping, done while the dog was under anesthesia during the operation. Next paragraph. Next slide, please. In the intervening years, fresh contiguous areas were added to the city and Greater Chennai was formed. The size of the city virtually doubled and the population went up to 14 million people. At that point, the city decided to set up 2 more sterilization centers, which they manage on their own, and only about a third of the unspayed street animals come to the Blue Cross Center. While it costs us approximately $25 to spay and feed the animal for 5 days and then release the animal in the same place where it was picked up from after an anti-rabies shot, we are reimbursed only about 20% by the municipality. The same $5 that they were giving us 20 years earlier in 2001. There have been very, very few cases of human rabies cases reported. And all of them are from the freshly extended area where the ABC program is not being done very aggressively. Next paragraph, please. The adoption rate of Indian dogs has gone up, and there's a lot of awareness today on responsible pet ownership. Like we have for millennia, in most places, dogs and people coexist happily. With the exponential growth in vehicular traffic, a street is really no longer a place for a dog. And while most street dogs still have either individual persons or the community feeding them, the dogs lack many things, including medical attention. Since 1987, the Blue Cross of India has had an annual Great Indian Dog Show for non-pedigree and indie dogs. While this has certainly raised the image of the Indian dog in the eyes of the public, there is much more that needs to be done. Next paragraph, please. The advent of the pandemic and 2 long drawn-out lockdowns has been a major blow to the street dog ABC program all over India. Hopefully, there will be no further major upsurges in infection, and we can resume and expand our programs. Chennai has also been included by the Rockefeller Foundation on the 100 Resilient Cities program. It has also been recognized as a smart city by the government of India, and both groups are headed by animal-friendly people who are working with the Blue Cross to make Chennai a better place for animals and people. Thank you very much.
Our subject matter experts, we have our partners, and then we also have our subject matter experts, which are in fact our global dog team. And we have incredible people that have dedicated a lot of time to develop this project, and these experts will work directly with the partners and on an upper level as well. They have essential knowledge and technical and data repository support. And for those who locally do not have this expertise or resources available. Our first speaker is Dr. John Boone. He's an ecologist and conservation biologist who has conducted numerous dog population surveys around the world: India, Mauritius, the Philippines, the Mariana Islands. John is wonderful to work with and has provided a lot of insight for the rest of the global team. And there you go, John.
Thank you, Kathleen, and glad to be here and welcome everybody to the webinar. As Kathleen mentioned, I am an ecologist and wildlife biologist by training. I work primarily with an organization called the Great Basin Bird Observatory, where we do a diverse palette of applied conservation research and conservation planning. A significant amount of that work involves counting birds, doing bird surveys, which you see illustrated at the bottom left of this slide. And it turns out that the techniques and the approaches that we've used to count birds and other wildlife species are quite transferable to counting street dogs. And they're particularly transferable in the format of something that we call transect surveys. Those transect surveys are what you see me doing, I believe, in the Philippines at the bottom right. And basically, it just means that a surveyor has an assigned area, that they go into that area and walk along the roads and follow a specific set of instructions to record the dogs that are there. Next slide, please. All right, well, get that changed, okay. All of the things that Andrew, Kathleen, and the others have been talking about using data within these programs to support them and inform them, are going to start with good dog survey data, especially when it's combined with other mechanisms like household surveys and shelter data sets. So it's a fundamental building block for all of the things we've been talking about. So what make for good, reliable survey data? A bunch of things, but the two things that I'll highlight really are a good sampling design and good standardization. Sampling design is illustrated on the slide at the left. Those are places, those red squares, where we actually did transect surveys for street dogs in the city of Lilongwe of Malawi, and we used that data to extrapolate, to form insights about that entire city, which you see illustrated in the various green colors here. So that's one of the building blocks, is a good sampling design. Lots of problems in dog population data come from a poor sampling design. So it's important to get that right. The other part of it is good standardization. That means that everybody who does these counts in different places or at different times needs to follow protocols strictly, so that we don't end up with apples and oranges, so to speak, in our data set, so that the whole data set is measuring the same thing regardless of where it's done and when it's done. And standardization can be accomplished through clear instructions, which you see illustrated in the upper right, just one bullet point from a set of survey instructions for street dog transect surveys. And it can be accomplished by making sure that the entire team of people who are going to be conducting those surveys have gotten the proper training, which you see illustrated in the Philippines, I believe, at the bottom right. This training is very important because it also represents a technology transfer or a knowledge transfer to local partners who can go on to design and perform these surveys on their own. Next slide and last slide, please. When we get good survey data, many things become possible. We start to see patterns, for instance, and what you see in the left-hand side of this slide is the fact that the density of street dogs, the darker red colors, is higher in some parts of this municipality in Panama than in others. You see another pattern on the right. This sort of mirrors what Andrew was talking about with regard to the relative measurement of dog numbers in relation to human population. And what we see here in this graph is that, essentially, in a nutshell, that areas where human density is lower, more rural areas, tend to have more dogs per person than more urban areas. All of these patterns and relationships that I've just talked about can be further explored and investigated and formalized statistically, which is what Tyler will talk about. So I will turn it over to him, and thank you very much.
Thank you, John. Appreciate it. Our next global team member is Dr. Tyler Flockhart. He's a population ecologist and a conservation biologist who did his doctoral research in outdoor cats and who has become an expert in modeling roaming populations of comparison animals, of companion animals. He's the one that does a lot of the statistics, the modeling. Of course, I always ask him the questions, and he's an expert. And I welcome Tyler Flockhart.
Thanks, Kathleen. Hi, everybody. Can we go to the next slide, please? Great. So what I bring to this team is that my interest is in the abundance and distribution of animal populations. And animals, for me, traditionally were wildlife. I've done a lot of work on birds. I've done a lot of work on butterflies. And more recently, I've been interested in companion animals, cats and dogs. And that involves both indoor cats, outdoor cats, as well as indoor dogs and outdoor dogs. And really, they all operate the same. It's just understanding how those populations work. And if you think about dogs, there's two ways to consider them. One is sort of the demographics of dogs, that is how puppies survive and grow to become intact dogs that will reproduce and produce more puppies. And that's sort of a demographic model to understand birth rates, death rates, and survival rates. And the second is sort of the spatial component of it, and looking at where we find areas with higher numbers of dogs and areas with lower numbers of dogs, and what the underlying reasons are for those patterns. Next slide, please. And really, one of the things that I want to bring, not only to the idea of population ecology and management, is this optimal management development. And that is, how do we reach objectives, social objectives, at the lowest cost, that are the most effective, that are likely to be less combative among different stakeholders. And I've used this approach when it comes to the conservation of monarch butterflies. So these are butterflies that move between international borders. So how do we get countries to collaborate to save species at risk, as well as the management of cats in urban areas? How do we make optimal decisions to manage cats so that we have the highest welfare for cats, as well as the lowest cost to reach our objectives? Next slide, please. And so I think that the specialty is needed, and what I bring to the team is that I can allow the counts, that is the data that John was just talking about, and transfer that into a model. And models use the data to explain the patterns of dog populations. And that can be whether we're talking about dog population demographics, so the birth rate, the death rate, and the reproduction rate, or if we're talking about dogs on the landscape. So where are the areas of high density and where are the areas of low density of dogs? Next slide, please. And really, these models are useful because it allows us to apply different actions to understand how those actions may influence dog population management. Next slide. So we talked about what happens when you sterilize dogs, that is when you go out and trap them and prevent them from reproducing in the future. And ultimately what that means, and this is intuitive to everybody here, is that once you've sterilized a dog, it can't produce puppies again. It occurs in the population, it's a dog that occurs in the population, but it's not able to reproduce, right? And because we had that intervention, it affects the biology of the population and the demographics of that population. Next slide, please. And ultimately, these models can be used to predict how you may apply multiple actions, which occurs all the time. We apply one action here or a different action here, or two actions in unison. But we want to understand what is the optimal answer to reach our objectives. Which action should we take, when and where, and how can we do that to reach our objectives? Because for every action we do take, we might not take another one. We have finite numbers of resources. There's finite amounts of money to be spent on this, and we want to know how can we get the best bang for our buck when it comes to management. Next slide, please. So those actions may look like this spatially on the landscape. Where would we sterilize dogs to bring the population down? Next slide, please. And what got me involved in WBI and the Global Dog Program? Well, I'm interested in wildlife populations, I'm interested in animal welfare, and I'm interested in human health. And I'm interested in the connection between those three components. And for me, really what hit home when I started thinking about street dogs was the impact that it may have on people and the tens of thousands of people, mostly children, that die from rabies each year, which I think is it's unacceptable, and we need to do something about that. And at the same time, we can improve animal welfare, which I think will bring people together. And so I'm hoping that, you know, my involvement can allow us to sort of design some of these optimal management strategies to reach these goals. And I've listed some of those here, because ultimately that's what we need when we need to get public buy-in and when we need to get government buy-in when it comes to sponsoring and collaborating on these large-scale projects that we're talking about, whether it's within a community, across a state, across a country, or around the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Tyler. I appreciate it. Our GIS and a database specialist is a gentleman known by the name of Josh Coefer. He's a master at this, at taking country perspectives, 190 of them, and all the different levels of data that needs to be brought together, brought up from the locals, the analysis and so forth. He's been just a wonderful asset to the team. Next slide, please. The basis of our whole repository, our data repository, is really a centralized data set and a suite of tools for managing information related to WBI and the Global Dog Campaign. It includes data on people, animals, the environment, from a variety of public and actually private sources as well. And the WBI data repository really is a suite of tools for inputting, outputting, analyzing, and visualizing data, which I get excited about. Okay, the repository is really spatially enabled. This is, it supports the traditional data analysis methodologies, but it also supports the spatial analysis and can answer questions such as, how does the population of street dogs correlate to human density and other factors? So the primary purpose of the repository for the Global Dog Campaign is to provide information and tools necessary for WBI and its stakeholders to research topics and to track initiatives. So we kind of start with this cloud-based relational database here. And it's really a post-GRE SQL database. That's what we selected. And this post kind of term included in that name is really the database that includes this kind of spatial extension, so that we can enable advanced spatial analysis techniques directly within this database and not having to go to other databases or other tools or platforms, thereby making these capabilities available to external tools interfacing with this database. The cloud-based approach provides reliability, scalability, and ease across and access required by the GDC and its shareholders. This is very scalable. So for us beginning this project, it was a very good decision to be able to get the top-notch technology and be able to utilize it at a lower level until we scale up. And furthermore, this database, this central database, actually is compatible with most data analyses and visualization tools used by many of the individuals and stakeholders and organizations that will be utilizing the facilities. This flexibility enables these people and groups to leverage the tools which they are proficient and comfortable, and all the while sourcing from and contributing to a comprehensive centralized database. This approach really promotes collaboration and consistency for all involved. Click on the first slide. Now we get into some more interesting things here. So one of the tools that this central relational database actually integrates is something called ArcGIS platform. And this is where all, John and Tyler and all of them get really excited. This is where we actually can, visualize data. I mean, it's a very wonderful concept in terms of trying to understand data. And also this particular platform has many other analytical and analysis tools, analytical tools that we can use. Can you click on number 2, please? And I will be talking some of John's language as well. And so this is really a focus on a collection of data. And so, for example, street dog surveys are conducted using ArcGIS Pro and ArcGIS Surveys and 123 and ArcGIS Tracker. And all these are changing almost every 6 months. They're upgrading to do more and more things. The ArcGIS Survey 123 is a mobile device application, which Josh has already implemented. The interface is used by surveyors to follow the predefined routes and document the sightings and condition of street dogs along the routes. And this is what John was describing in his discussion, and he's an expert on this. Collected data is automatically uploaded to the repository and made available to others utilizing the platform. The ArcGIS Tracker is used to assure the quality of the data. ArcGIS web applications make the results available to WBI stakeholders for review and analysis. And these applications allow users to visualize the data in a mapping interface, analyze it, and draw conclusions. The web-based forms are another key tool integrated within the repository. These forms can be used independently or embedded in websites. Ours will have embedded in our website as well, and allow global dog stakeholders such as municipalities and animal shelters to report information on animal shelters, outcomes, sterilization, vaccination, and other key factors. Similar web-based products forms are also used to conduct public-facing surveys, such as surveys on domestic pets and pet care. Collected information is automatically synced with the WBI DR and made available to others for review and analysis. And that's one of the benefits of having, this centralized relational database that can connect to others. Number 3, the repository is really a flexible platform. It provides interfaces for a variety of tools used. This is where Tyler gets very excited. Okay, for example, information on the repository can be retrieved from via Python, which is a high-level programming language. I must comment that that's not in my skill set, okay? And R scripts for statistical analysis and visualization. Analysis results can be written directly to the database, making them available to others to utilize. So we can build on our research and analysis. This platform was really built and designed with the interoperability being the key tenet. Our final click. So where do we get from here? Well, we are also connected. All of these are connected together, and the WBI website actually has a direct connection to the centralized database. This is where we will be able to report and share these analyses and outcomes and display them and so forth. And it's really a component of our commitment to the CLA, which is collaborate, learn, and adapt. And that's what we're trying to promote. Now, one last thing that I actually did not put in here is something that we have available as well. And it is connected. It is connected to the website, and it's something called the Wellbeing International Studies Repository. Now, this is a full text open access data repository with over 5,000 items relating to people, animals, and the environment. And this will also be, it's accessed through the website. It'll be connected through our comprehensive relational database, and this information will be able to flow through and be able to be shared. I do believe that's the end of that section. I would like to talk about one of our team members, Laura Gosse. I mean, WBI is so, there she is, you see her, there she is. We are so fortunate to have a multi-talented team member who can do it all. As she was instrumental in creating WBI's website, developing the multiple social media platforms, designing and delivering WBI newsletters, which she deserves a medal because she has to work with me on that, and overseeing WBI's messaging. I mean, it's just across the board. So the community outreach and engagement with local people and having the right messaging to flow through to municipalities and states and upper level is an essential part of the Global Dog Campaign. And with this critical component in place, we believe that the project's success is significantly improved when this piece is working. And under Laura's direction, GDC will provide project assistance to their for their GDC webpage design and usage. She will help with their social media platform design. She will build out contact lists. She will outreach templates, create outreach templates, and actually help with messaging as well. So she is very important in terms of our team. End of the presentation, and we'll enter into the question section. We have been collecting questions, and Andrew Rowan will be allocating the questions and also answering some, I believe, as well. Okay.
Yeah, thank you very much, Kathleen. I have been answering questions on the Q&A, so people should check to see if there's an answer there. But we'd like to start with a question for Chinny. It is assumed that human rabies deaths in India are underreported. How much confidence do you have in the human rabies case numbers reported for Chennai?
Very honestly, in the early 60s and 70s, the figures that we have from the corporation are certainly underreported. Today, with the much wider awareness created by social media as well as the media, I think that the figures that we get are fairly accurate. And the fact that even if there's one death from rabies today in Madras, it hits the headlines on the front page. I think that the difference that we have talked about, coming down from a high of 120 in 1996 to 0 in 2010, really means that there was a much higher number of cases of human rabies in 1996, probably 3 to 4 times the figures given by the corporation.
Thank you very much, Chinny. I mean, it's challenging that the data deficits occupy all sorts of areas that one would not expect. In terms of data, John has to leave us promptly to catch a plane. So I'm going to ask him next. John, how hard would it be for local organizations to collect the type of dog population data you discussed in the presentation?
Groups that undertake this kind of work generally find it's easier than they thought it would be. Obviously, if it's unfamiliar, there's a little bit of training that's necessary, but we have routinely relied on employees or volunteers of local partnering organizations around the world to do the bulk of the counting work. Now, that said, some of the other more technical elements of these counts and the analysis of these counts does benefit tremendously from some expert assistance, like is being provided through the Global Dog Campaign, particularly with regard to designing a sampling plan, which I talked about very briefly, and then analyzing and interpreting data, which Tyler has talked about some. But there's a great deal of the actual on-the-ground work that is well within reach of local partners with a wide variety of skill sets. So I would encourage everyone not to be scared of that process.
Thank you very much, John. Dr. Mo, you hired your dog catching team members from municipal employees who had previously been involved in the dog culls prior to 2017. Why did you decide to hire these people, and how has it worked out?
Thank you, Andrew. It's a good question. Before I answer your question, I would like to take this opportunity and say thank you to all our partners, and especially Bridget Bodo Foundation, Dr. Worldwide, Edgar Cooper. And also we shouldn't ignore the Afghan parties, partners, especially Ministry of Agriculture and Farming, who are the policymaker in Afghanistan. They stand with us, and also Kabul municipality, to make this project happen. To answer your question, I want to say, when I interview 50, 60 of these dog catchers, which previously they were killing dogs, and they was very willing to help dogs, and they was disagree with the killing dogs, and they are very, kind heart, and they want to do the dog population management in the right way, not killing dogs. So we select those staff to pay back and go and be part of our program. One thing. The other thing, we want to show the Kabul municipality to use their manpower in the right way. And use that asset as instead to people call them as a dog killer, then they call them as a dog population management team, and they in the future they be ambassador of this project. And also thirdly, the Mayhew strategy was to building capacity of all the parties who are working for the dog population management and rabies control to be part of this program, and then gradually hand over this program for the Kabul authority. And yes, in this journey, Kabul Ministry of Agriculture and Farming, Kabul municipality help us a lot. Yeah, that's the reason we choose the dog catchers.
Well, I think it's very encouraging that you're back on the ground working in Kabul, despite the significant change in government there. And that's, I'm really excited that you were there. And I would thank your partners and your funders as well. We think this is a very exciting project, very important because it's in a Muslim country. And so it indicates A, that there are dogs in Muslim countries, and B, that people do care about them.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. Yes, yes, I came a few days ago back to Kabul to push the project, and I had a meeting with a Ministry of Agriculture and Authority, especially Dr. Mukhtar from the Ministry of Agriculture is with us tonight here. And they offered us, and they offered their support to continue and to expand the project, which is very encouraging, and we appreciate their support.
Thank you very much, Mo.
Thank you.
Lillian, I've got a question for you. So private veterinary clinics in the United States have played a major role in increasing the dog sterilization rates there. What do you have to say about the private veterinarians in Costa Rica? What sort of role are they playing?
Thank you, Andrew. Well, since we started over the years, the private section, you can say, has doubled. They're very, when we started, there were very few vets. Now it's loaded with vets. I think worldwide, a lot of more veterinarians. In the beginning, the AHPPA had a huge problem because we were starting with our no-low neuter campaigns for dogs and cats. So we were attacked by the vets because they felt that we were taking a lot of their income from them. But like the saying goes, if you cannot fight them, join them. So then they started about, you can say, 8 years ago, they started to do their own low neutering campaigns all over Costa Rica. Most of the vets do it now. So I feel that we open the doors because otherwise a lot of people cannot afford to neuter their animals. It's not that they don't want to, or when they're sick, they cannot do it, but they cannot help the animals. So since we started, the prices on the private section and the campaigns are doing fantastic. They started doing what we have been doing for years. So I'm glad that we were the, how do you call that? That we started to show them that if the only thing is you work a little harder, but your income can be the same. So it helped a lot to get the strays and the suffering animals down. Although we still get most of the animals, not the neuterings, but that have an accident, that they charge like $1,000 to get the bone breakage done. But we will always jump in. We always help, and people know that. They come from all over the country to our clinic. Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you. And I'd like to note that the veterinary clinic at AHPPA is an important generator of income, but no animal that is in need is turned away because somebody can't pay. So just sort of comment on that. It's always something that's intrigued me about that. Tyler, I have a question for you. So as you sort of start looking at the data needs and the requirements for sort of modeling, how would you go about sort of getting the data? I mean, you can use the Costa Rican survey as an example, but I'd like you just to sort of comment on that and whether or not you're planning on publishing the Costa Rican data.
Yeah, good question, Andrew. So that corresponds to a survey that we did in Costa Rica. And those data are being analyzed now. And yeah, we're planning to write that up right around Christmas time this year and submit it to a scientific publication. And basically the goal is to understand how dog ownership and sterilization rates have changed over time, which is an important attribute if we're thinking about detecting trends in dog ownership and perceptions and attitudes of dogs. So normally what we would do if we're going to conduct that type of analysis is we would gather old data sources if they're available. So that may be white papers that have been published, reports that have been published, scientific papers that have been published, and pull the information out of those sources, because that serves in a way as a baseline data set for us to compare to more recent surveys, as long as the methodology is similar, that is how the data was collected. And in a way, if we can look back at those old studies, we can look at how that data was collected and try and mirror it to some extent with the more recent data collection, which allows us to draw inference. And John suggested this before, sort of apples to apples comparisons. And if we can do that in one location, we can detect these trends over time. And of course, if we think more broadly, if we think across multiple countries and we do this type of analysis, we start to get at sort of these larger and larger generalities in terms of dog ownership perceptions, sterilization rates, and what have you. And that's really what we're interested in understanding, is how are these trends in dog populations and attitudes and perceptions of dogs changing over time.
Thank you very much, Tyler. We're getting close to the witching hour and John has to dash off to the airport. So I don't want to
Hold on.
drag this out, but I'll give Kathleen the last word.
I just have to unmute. You were asking everyone else questions, so I thought I would ask you one. How's that? Okay. So do dog sterilization campaigns in countries with large number of homeless dogs change the way communities view these dogs? And what about anti-rabies vaccination campaigns only?
Yeah, it's an interesting, a very interesting issue. There's this difference between the anti-rabies vaccination implementers and the humane dog management individuals, in that humane dog management programs typically add sterilization to the equation. They vaccinate the dogs as well, but they will sterilize the dogs that they catch. And so the question is that it costs more money to sterilize and vaccinate than it does just to vaccinate? And the question is that economically worthwhile? And that's something where we don't have much in the way of good data. My gut feeling or my experience tells me that, in fact, the sterilization has some important sort of educational components. It gets people to start looking in a different way. They start looking at this and saying, oh, that's what you do to take care of a dog. I hadn't realized that. I was always doing it somewhat differently. And as a result, you get this people starting to sort of bring their animals to a vet. There was a situation in Bali where a local group was doing sterilizations or going into a village and doing a sort of one-day clinic every month. And the people began to bring their animals to the clinic. And the local veterinarians who were originally opposed to them coming into their villages to provide free veterinary care discovered that when they were gone, there were people still asking for that veterinary care, and they were able to charge them for that. So there was a big change in the sort of local population behavior in terms of how they took care of their animals. And so that's why we tend to sort of think of sterilization as a very important educational stimulus for people to change the way they look at and treat their animals or their dogs. So.
Yeah. It is time. It is now 1:31. And we want to thank everyone, the people who viewed the webinar, our speakers, our partners, our global team members for being part of this effort, this global effort. And we wish all of you the very best.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you
Appreciate your
all.
time.